morning, everyone. My name is Merle Massey. I'm the coordinator of undergraduate research here at the University of Saskatchewan. And this recording today is how to get into grad school. It's a roundtable with a number of graduate students at the University of Saskatchewan. And they are doing this for me as a favor, and I appreciate it very much, for the Student Undergraduate Research Experience Program. We have a whole number of recorded webinars that we've done on a number of topics. Feel free to take a look at the other ones on our website. And with that, I will introduce our three speakers for today, which are Andrea Wishart and Bidushi Siddiqa and Andrew Hartman. We had a fourth one who may or may not join us, and if he comes, that's great. I also had another student, Teav Sumuru, who was unable to come today, but he sent in some typed responses to a pre-recorded list of questions, and I will feed those in as we go along. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to turn it over first to the three students who are here, Andrea, Andrew, and Bidushi, who are going to each take turns telling you about who they are and how they got to be where they are. I'll ask that everyone keep themselves on mute unless they're the ones speaking, and we will go from there. And Andrea, you are up first.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see your initials. I guess I can't see most people's faces in this setup. But my name is Andrea Wishart. I am a fifth-year PhD student in the Department of Biology at U of S. So I've lived here since January 2016 is when I started. Currently, my PhD is studying food caching behavior in red squirrels. So I get to go up to the Yukon most years and run around in the forest and do a lot of behavioral observations and trapping, live trapping of red squirrels, which is really, really fun. But it's completely different from what I did kind of like starting off in school. So I'll kind of backtrack a little bit. So I'm originally from London, Ontario. It's where I grew up, and I also went to Western University for both my undergrad and my master's. So I spent most of my life in Southern Ontario, save for 1 year that I spent abroad at the University of Leeds in England. So I have a little bit of international experience as well. But my undergrad was mostly biology. I specialized in biology, but I did a minor in art history and criticism, which is a little bit of a weird thing for most science students. So I have a little bit of a weird background kind of from the get-go from undergrad. Was really unsure whether I wanted to go biology route or art history coming out of undergrad, but I ended up starting to work in a lab that I volunteered in when I was in undergrad. And I was a research assistant throughout that summer right after I graduated, which was 2010, a little while ago. And then I ended up doing my master's in that lab. So I started off doing animal behavior work, kind of similar to what I'm doing now, but I took the genetics route and I actually did a master's degree in mouse genetics and genomics and bioinformatics. Turns out it wasn't really my jam. I didn't really like it a whole lot. So I took a year and a half off in between my master's and my PhD, spent some time working and volunteering at a wildlife rehabilitation clinic. And I also worked in the herbarium at Western for a while and did some other volunteering before I decided to move into ecology and evolution for my PhD. So my path has been fairly biology, but a little bit wiggly and with some other sort of interdisciplinary aspects thrown in there. So happy to talk about anything about changing paths, changing ideas, and that sort of thing.
Fantastic. Thanks, Andrea. Andrew, do you want to pop up next?
Sure, yeah, and I even unmuted, so this is already a great start, and I wasn't talking to myself. So, hello everyone, my name is Andrew Hartman. I am a queer Métis student here at the University of Saskatchewan. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm currently doing my dissertation in applied social psychology, which was never the plan. I don't know how I'm here, but I'm doing my dream that I never knew I had. I did my undergrad here in psychology at the U of S, and then I ended up working in student affairs. And my boss was amazing, but didn't really understand how students work. So I did a master's just to figure out how do I actually get better at supporting students. And I specifically chose a course-based. I was never doing research. I was not doing a thesis. That was the dream. And then I kept getting hounded by a professor and the TA saying, you have to do a thesis, Andrew, you have to. And then I finally had an idea about shame and student persistence and help seeking, and there wasn't a lot of literature around it. So I applied in and I did it, and I fell in love with research. I wasn't expecting it. I thought a thesis was going to be overwhelming, but it's just a bunch of chapters that you're writing. It's a bunch of 30-page papers, really. And during that time, I ended up doing some volunteer work with research at a community agency out in Saskatoon. And the supervisor for that project actually ended up asking me to do my PhD under her. And she's like, you can evaluate this 5-year gender-based violence project at Out Saskatoon throughout your program, as well as doing your dissertation. And so I ended up accepting that and leaving a really stable job, which is really hard for me to do, to the randomness of funding for a project here and doing this task here, but loving it every step of the way. And I forgot to say my PhD focus is I'm looking at the impacts of shame, like the psychological process of shame and disenfranchised grief in queer survivors of traumatic gender-based violence. So I'm looking at when they're in those experiences, how do those psychological processes play effect in their healing?
Thank you, Andrew. That's amazing work. And I have been able to connect with both Andrea and Andrew on various levels. Andrea mostly on Twitter, and Andrew through his work with the ISAP program that he left. So that's that stable job that he talked about. And that's the Indigenous Students Achievement Pathways. And so I'm pleased to have these connections. And the third connection is with Bidushi Siddiqa. And Bidushi has been a research coach with the FIRE project, which I run here on campus, as well as a researcher with another FIRE project that I've been working on some research with. So I'm pleased to introduce Bidushi next.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Hidushi, and I'm a second-year master's student in culture, health, and human development psychology. And my research for my master's thesis is like focuses on the experiences of colorism for South Asian women in Canada. I am basically interested in research on gender, sexuality, and race. So I had the idea of entering grad school because like I have heard from people, like when I was an undergrad, I have heard from everyone that it's hard to find a job with an undergrad degree in psychology. So that's how I kind of planned to enter grad school. But then as I like progressed in my academic years in undergrad, and as I started doing research, I kind of became more passionate about the like doing research on gender, sexuality, and race. So now I am really enjoying being a grad student. It's like people recognize me, people recognize my work. So that's really awesome. And yeah, like when I came to university, I had the plan of like going for pharmacy, but then I realized that pharmacy is not my thing. I don't like chemistry. I did very bad in chemistry. So, and at that time I took psychology as an elective and I absolutely loved it. So that's how I kind of shifted to psychology. That's it, I guess.
That's awesome. That's a great. You have quite different paths, even though in some ways it sounds similar. I like, Andrea, that you talked about, your art background, your art history background, and then how that shifted over to biology. And Bidushi, you talked about, like, I was supposed to be a pharmacist, and I went, yeah, no, not happening. And so I ended up somewhere else. And that's very common, of course, in university. And it often actually happens when people take on research projects at their undergraduate year in the summer, which is what so many of you are doing. So the first question that I asked the panelists, and what we can do this time is that you can either just take turns or you can all unmute and discuss this, but what is more important, the school that you apply to or the supervisor? When you're thinking about graduate school, which is more important? Take it away, you three.
I would definitely say supervisor like makes or breaks a student's uh, experience, and just really considering so many things you have to consider, and it's there you'll never get the 100%. It's like that triangle of like you can't have two of three, you know, it's like very much that. But yeah, just what is their specialty areas? How do they operate? How many students do they have? What is the success rate of their students? How do they collaborate? And so doing like your projects now is a great way to figure out those potential supervisors.
I agree with Andrew. It's the supervisor who you closely work with. So like definitely like you and your supervisor has to like be on the same page in terms of your and then like how is your supervisor like do they give you opportunities and etc. And also there is another fact that the school should have funding for the graduate student, like does the school have opportunities, does the school have funding? So that is another point too. So I feel that there is no straight answer to this. It's more of like supervisor because that's who you closely work with, but then also you need a school that has opportunities and appropriate fundings, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree with that statement. So I used to think that it was kind of a 90% supervisor, 10% the school. So I had a not great experience doing my master's, and my supervisor and I did not get along. I'm happy to talk individually to people if you wanted more information on that, but I'll leave it there. But through that experience and now my experience at U of S, which is totally different, which is good. I've learned that it's probably, well, I would agree with Andrew's statement that it's the supervisor can make or break it. You certainly want to put that as a top priority and make sure that they sort of fit all of the criteria that you want. And another big important thing is that you have shared work values. Do they expect you to be in the lab from 9 to 5 every single day? And if you're 5 minutes late, that's no good. Or is it much more suited to however you work? So kind of trying to match up on some of those values as well, and how you want to be trained going forward for your career. And then things like the lab and whatnot. But the reason that I also would reflect and say that it's just as important with the school is not necessarily the reputation of the school, like might be more important when you're choosing an undergraduate program, but the services that are available, and especially, and I would say more so at a PhD level, sort of what else is going on at your department level, what other people are doing similar research that can support you through that. So that's where maybe a bigger department might fit you a little bit more. So not necessarily the university versus the supervisor, but starting to look at sort of those in between. But if you're an undergrad starting in a master's program, that might not be as critical. And again, most master's programs are typically a little shorter, although I took just under 4 years for mine. So I'm probably not the best person on that front. But definitely a mix, but the supervisor is much more important. It'll be something that's new as undergraduates. It's maybe not something that was your, on the docket when you were choosing your university, or even choosing your research project for the summer. But it will definitely be something that's important moving forward.
That's awesome. I wanted to jump in and just read you what Tayab Sumru had to say. To answer to the question, he said, to me, the most important consideration for graduate school is the supervisor. So he definitely agrees with the three of you. Having a competent and fun, understandable supervisor goes a long way in making your entire graduate experience easier. But then he said, in order to figure out how good or how bad a supervisor is, you should always, and he wrote that in capital letters and bold, always talk to their previous students. This is the most important thing. Talking to previous students helps you get an idea of the lab culture. So, and if it's not necessarily a physical lab that your potential supervisor is running, let's say that they have a big SHRC research project. Let's say they're in humanities. I'm a historian, so that's what I look for. But see who else is in some of those programs and working with that supervisor. A good supervisor will be on top of that and say, you need to talk to some of my existing or just previous graduate students. And I have certainly done that. I have had my previous supervisors come to me and say, can you talk to this new potential incoming student? They want to know what I'm like as a supervisor. And if you happen to find someone who does that, that's the sign of a really excellent supervisor. So, but yes, I agree with Tayab. Definitely talk to other students. What do the three of you have to say about that?
I was going to say, to add to that too, like, I remember saying to my supervisor, my PhD one, this is the longest relationship I've ever committed to. And to think of it that way, you are committing to a 5-year relationship at least with someone, and knowing that this person is going to tell you everything you're doing wrong, and like you want to choose the person who's going to be telling you that all the time, and how they interact with you at the start before you even apply is a strong indicator of how they're going to communicate to you when you're in the program. So if they're not providing any support when they're trying to get you, how much support are they necessarily going to provide? Now, some supervisors may want to focus more on their students, but if they're not giving you anything, to me, that would be a red flag.
Yeah, that's absolutely, especially when you're applying. There are technical hoops. There are things that you have to write up. There, steps that you have to go through, and whether that's at the department level or at the university level, if they know what those steps are and kind of lay it out for you and help you guide them and are responsive to your emails if you've got questions, that's a good sign of a good supervisor as well. So definitely something to consider. Do you guys have any other thoughts around the schoolers or the supervisor? What about if a USask student who's maybe here with us on the call is considering moving to another university? Do any of you have any thoughts or ideas around that?
In that case, it's like when you contact your so if the student is wanting to move to another university, they contact the potential supervisors that they are interested to work with, and then it kind of depends on their responses on if that like like if the responses are very detailed and involved, then of course that is a good sign. So for example, I am I have started contacting supervisors for my PhD application, and then there was this prof who is extremely involved, and then that is something that I saw as a plus point. But then also it's kind of hard to make that connection from so far away from here. So in that case, like like it's always about trying to build that connection, and then trying to tell them about your academic stuff and stuff like that. Did I answer the question?
Yes,
Yeah.
you did, Rushi. That was good. Did Andrew or was Andrea? Andrew is more like me. Andrew, I did all of my degrees at the U of S. I'm married to a farmer, so I'm not very mobile. But Andrea, you're more mobile. Do you have some thoughts around what it's like to move from one university to another?
Absolutely. So like I mentioned, I spent a year abroad. So I already had, before I even graduated undergrad, I had experience interacting at another university, going to a completely different country for one. So that was kind of next level differences, but it made me very aware of some of the differences, not just between countries, but also just between institutions, how things are run. And so I was a little bit more in tune with that, even though I decided to stay at Western for my master's degree. It certainly helped when I was It was actually quite hard for me to decide to stay at Western because I always envisioned myself traveling the world and going abroad for not only my undergrad, but everything beyond. But I ended up staying in my hometown for both the undergrad and the master's. And you'll hear from a lot of people, and again, this it might matter more so when it comes time for the PhD. There's sort of the old school, more of the fossils in the university system that say that it's not good to do all of your degrees at one place. I think that is not good advice, and it's a bad attitude to have, because obviously there's a lot of reasons that people stay at one institution, and a lot of times you have fantastic connections, you're already very involved in the project and the community, and there's a lot of reasons to stay. That being said, there are benefits also to moving institutions as well, and moving to different places and different experiences. For me, there just wasn't the network that I wanted to necessarily work with at Western, and I wanted to kind of leave the nest and travel a little bit more and have a new experience. And the only place that was really offering that, and especially being able to do the field work on rodents, which is what I really wanted to be working on, the only opportunity that was available at that time was at U of S, and it meant being able to travel to the Yukon, whereas if I wanted to stay at Western, I wouldn't have had that opportunity. So it is a little bit harder when you're trying to interact with people at other institutions that you don't have the chance to necessarily meet in person. I was really lucky. My supervisor here actually offered to host me here for a weekend before I said yes or no. So I used points actually to fly out, but he put me up in a bed and breakfast here, took me out to dinner and showed me around campus and introduced me to the current lab and everything. And I was really able to decide whether or not it was the right opportunity for me. And I would strongly advise, doing as much research as possible. The great thing about the internet is it's really easy to kind of creep on people in terms of their research output, who their networks are, check out their lab website, see what their current lab students are saying, what their coworkers and their colleagues are saying as well. You get a good sense of kind of how somebody's professional life is if they are putting that out there. The other thing, just in terms of talking to other students, when you are talking to other students in the lab, the PIs might put forward a few names of students that they want you to talk to in the lab, because they'll give them a good letter of reference. Just looking back to my experience in my master's when things didn't go very well, my supervisor kind of cut me off, like never told incoming students that I existed, because she didn't want me to talk to them. So if you are talking to current students, ask about all of the lab members. Ask if there's anyone else that you're missing from a list of personal contacts, because it is really great when supervisors say, hey, here's a bunch of students, but you also want to keep in mind who they might not be putting forward. And I know that sounds really negative and nefarious, and I hope that most people are not like that, but I have had experience in the past. So you really want to hear everything. And if you are hearing red flags, it's really important to listen to them and judge for yourself whether or not it's something that matters to you specifically or not.
I think that's really, really good advice, that, they're telling you all the good things. Also be paying attention and listening to the things that they're not telling you. So that's a good thing. The second question that I had for the roundtable is, which is more important, a fully developed research topic or idea to present to the potential supervisor? Like, do you need to have this very fully fleshed research area or research topic that you want to work on? Or do you need to be open to working on whatever the supervisor's project is in progress? Which of those two do you kind of need to be thinking your way through? And I'll leave it over to you, and you guys can all jump in whenever it works for you.
I would say there is no straight answer over here as well. It's like, so if you do have a fully developed research idea to present to your supervisor, that kind of shows to your supervisor that you are passionate and you are committed to doing the grad school. And it also shows that you are critically thinking about these topics, these ideas, and that you care. But then at the same time, your supervisors will also likely to have some side projects that they would like their graduate students to work with. So like in that case, you have to be like open minded about working in your supervisor's project and then performing well. And then like in that way, like you kind of show it to your supervisor that you are competent and kind of making a balance between like multiple research opportunities. This is kind of hard, but then like as time goes, you do get used to it. And especially when the research is on the topic that you are passionate about, then like there comes a point when you like start to enjoy it, like according to my experience.
I would, yeah, I agree with a lot of what Badushi said. And I would say, like, I would choose secret option number 3, which is having a fully thought out idea, which is different than having it fully developed. But having an idea of all the different ways you're looking at it, making sure it's theory driven, having an idea for your methodology. And so you can provide them with something of here's everything I've thought about initially. Then they can provide and have a full understanding of what you're thinking about and provide you guidance with doing it. And like my supervisor is different than Badushi's in that my research area is very different than my supervisor's. It was because I liked the way she did research and her techniques is what I wanted to learn from her. So I proposed a really weird topic that there wasn't a lot of research out, but when I went through it, I said, here's the theories I'm pulling together. Here's how it kind of all works together. Like, is this an okay idea? And she said, I want a 10-page proposal on this now. Like, go back. I like it. And so like, oh, and that was the first time that's ever happened. I get like red inked to death from feedback, but I was like, it was the first time. And like really putting the time to think out your idea and think about play your own devil's advocate, I think is really important to make sure you're providing a good first draft for people to give guidance towards, because they want you to do good. Your committee is on your side usually and wants to provide you all the information to give the best research you can possibly create. So the more you help them help you, the better it'll be.
Can I add something? So like I did say that a fully developed idea definitely shows to your supervisor that you are involved. But then at the same time, like I would say like the students should not feel pressurized. Like after all, they have just started grad school, and then grad school is very different from undergrad. So like sometimes it's okay if your mind is blank, and then like you can have like you can be more open minded to like your supervisor's idea. Like it's like you are a person, like you don't have to have ideas all the time. So like it's okay if you are blank, and then you tell your supervisor like I have these topics in mind, but then I don't know how to put it in a like specific idea. Like I think that is also okay. And then your supervisor will be like they are mostly helpful about it. Like they don't like criticize you. So yeah.
I would add that it's probably discipline specific to some extent. Coming from the sciences, it's the way that the grants work, the basically where the money comes from for your supervisor to be able to run a research program. They tend to be a little bit more restricted, and especially when you're dealing with experiments and and animals or plants or whatever your study organism is, there's kind of a little bit more of a box there. And so it depends kind of supervisor to supervisor as well. For example, coming into my master's, I was kind of like handed the outline of a project saying, I just funded all of these really cool microarrays, which we use in science to look at genes and genetics and that sort of thing. And it was kind of like we want to investigate this particular thing. Here you go, here, do it. And I kind of developed some more research projects from it. Whereas coming into my PhD, it was really, I was responding to an advertisement where my supervisor was looking for a PhD student that he had funding for the red squirrel project. So it was kind of a given when I contacted him that I would be studying red squirrels to some degree. And when I looked at the research that he was doing, I knew it was going to be something along the lines of ecology and evolution. But beyond that, he was very supportive of like, contact me when you start in the lab. It's okay if you don't have any ideas to start with. We'll start kind of spitballing around. And so I never came with a full research proposal, but I did have a few ideas. Like I knew I was interested in food caching, and we kind of developed them from there. And moving in towards actually developing the proposal, which you write for your committee once you've already started the program, that's when you really kind of get into developing your methodology and that sort of thing. So again, my experience is very much rooted in the natural sciences. It sounds like it might be a little bit different between that and the social sciences, but also probably a little bit dependent on what kind of funding the supervisor has, as well as what the supervisor just kind of expects. So there might have to be a little bit of a conversation there.
Andrea, I think that's an excellent point. I do agree that it does depend on the supervisor's pot of money. And if they've already put in a massive insert grant and they're studying this particular thing, they've probably already written into their grant that they need, 3 master students working on these aspects and 2 PhDs working on these aspects. And there's a little bit of wiggle room in there, but, probably less so. So thank you for raising that. I did want to raise, so Grace asked a question. She said, is it vital to have these research ideas during your application and initial conversations with the supervisor in question, or after you begin your graduate school program?
I would say that you're probably going to be talking about that your first conversation, at least having a general idea of saying, hey, I'm really interested in animal behavior, which is very, very, very broad. But at least saying, you're more interested in behavior versus, and again, saying this from my experience in the sciences, saying that more so than microbiology, for instance, at least starts kind of narrowing down the avenues that you would like to go into. But that being said, you're not necessarily the expert in that field yet. So you'll be able to kind of say, hey, I'm interested in animal behavior. They say, hey, that's really cool. We've already got some of this kind of behavior data in the lab already to work with. And you say, oh, that's really interesting. Maybe I could do that with this data. And it sort of becomes a conversation. But going in and saying, I just want to work on squirrels and having no ideas beyond that. As you can see, I love squirrels from my background here. Just saying that it's not really enough for the supervisor to draw out where your research interests are. So just doing some brainstorming and kind of seeing where your interests lie will help not only help the project development, but it's going to ultimately be beneficial to you because you'll be able to see whether or not you're going to be interested in the project in that particular lab. So having a broad set of ideas is totally fine. Like I said, I've dabbled in genetics and physiology and behavior and kind of all across the board. And so it's okay to have multiple interests and be flexible on that front. But having some idea that you're interested in at least a particular avenue of research will certainly help the conversation.
I wanted to, oh, go ahead, Andrew.
I was just going to say, and I know like for my program, in our letter, we actually have to outline kind of a research area and at a high level. And it's really good, even if it's not, like you're not held to that, but they want to see like, can you think at the level of forming a research area and how you want to approach it and tackle it. It's also just a really good way of doing it. And especially if there's something that you have that might be different than like something you really want to research, communicating that is a really helpful way of just opening that communication channel with your supervisor, because they're seeing that when you're taking it on, you might have this. And then you can, before you accept, have that conversation with them about if there's like, for me, my research area was really important to me. So being able to communicate is really important with your supervisor, and having that fleshed out idea, just something is even just good practice to do.
It is a good practice, and it does show how you think, because they are looking for a little bit more of that higher order thinking, not just the I'm going to memorize this stuff and kick it out on an exam and forget about it. They want to know how are you actually interested in research and what that looks like, and have you thought about that? So I'm going to jump ahead to the last question, which is, what are your top 3 pieces of advice that you wish you'd known before entering graduate school? And I thought I'd take the opportunity to tell you Tayab's 3. And he said, number 1, look at your financial interests. Do you have financial stability? Maybe grad school is not the right choice. You will not get richer by going to graduate school. That being said, if you can cover the cost of living through stipends and scholarships, it's worth a consideration. Also, remember that you can also negotiate the stipend with your supervisor. What you get offered first isn't necessarily set in stone. So that was the first thing he said. Money does matter. Pay attention. Number 2, and do not self-fund your masters. Like if they don't have money, don't go. That's just Merle telling you, don't do that. The second, start reading research papers on a daily basis in your topic area if you haven't already. You're going to be ready to do lots and lots of papers. You need to get really good at directing and gleaning important information from a research project, from a research paper. And the third, Andrew, you're really loud. I love you, but you're loud.
Oh, sorry, I thought I muted. My biggest struggle is Zoom.
Number 3, socialize as much as possible, especially at the conferences and other research events. This is your prime opportunity to meet your potential employers, collaborators, and also some of your longest held friends. And I added that in on Tayab's point. But yes, of course, it's extremely difficult right now with COVID. It does not make it easy, but any opportunity that you might have to attend things like this, attend Friday socials, attend journal clubs, do any of those sorts of things. That's what Tayab wanted to say. I'm really sorry, Andrew. I'm going to put you on the spot next since you're ready to go. What are your top 3 pieces of advice?
I love being the center of attention. No, I'm kidding. Sorry about that. I did turn my fan off in case that was it. So, my first piece of advice is, don't take you out of your research, and knowing like the power of you and your experiences and the conversations you had and the connections you make between ideas and your research projects. Like that's also really part of being a creator of knowledge, is making those connections. And when you're writing it, you're telling stories and you're sharing research and you're sharing findings, and knowing that the connections that you're making, that's what is of value. It's these connections, these ways of understanding. And I think that's the biggest one that I've learned when writing, is that when you get to that level, you're there because you've made it and that you have something to add, and don't freak out like I do all the time. And then the other one is networking is like really critical, I found. And so like whenever you're meeting people at conferences with similar research areas, like getting their contact and just sending a follow-up information, and just like catching up every once in a while. Like I've had conversations with people about who've had similar research methodologies. We're both using steering committees and we're wanting to know how we're approaching it. They're just so grateful and so amazing. And like I've actually gotten little mini research projects out of that years after making those connections. And then I gave them some free consultation. They're like, actually, we need a researcher for some analysis. Do you want to do it? I was like, I didn't even think that was going to happen, but sure. So never forget that sometimes, which goes into my third piece of advice, like know what your time is worth. Like your time is worth something, but also know that volunteering is great. And I've volunteered for a lot of projects, and the first thing that happens usually after them, because I put so much into it, is that they hire me to do something next, or they're like, we want you to do this next thing. And we found some funding for that. So knowing that your time is worth something, but sometimes investing and growing a skill can lead to getting potential funding and jobs and opportunities down the road.
Thank you, Andrew. Andrea, do you want to go next? What are your top 3 pieces of advice? And then we'll go to Badushi. Then we've got some good questions coming in. I want to open up the floor at the end so that we can answer a few of these questions. But Andrea, your top 3.
It's so hard to choose. There are so many pieces of advice that I have learned the hard way. And no matter how many pieces of advice you get and you listen to, you will also learn everything the hard way going through. One of the top things is, I would say, center yourself in through this. It's really hard to separate you as a person from your ideas and your research. Or at least most people find that really difficult. So when you hear feedback on your ideas, maybe negative feedback on your ideas, learning to separate the negative feedback on ideas from negative on you as a person is really, really difficult, and it's a process. I remember getting my first few drafts back from my supervisor when I first started grad school, and what now I look back and realize it was just very constructive advice. I took it as, oh my gosh, I can't write a sentence. This is how poor I am at grad school. And it's taken me many, many, many years to try to separate that out. The other aspect of the center yourself thing is grad school and academia in general demands a lot from you. And especially if you have a lot to offer through your different experiences, or especially if you're an underrepresented minority in your field, you will be asked to do a lot of heavy lifting beyond what is typical of a grad student going through and doing research. And it's really, really important to ultimately be able to say yes to a lot of things, because there's opportunities. And like Andrew said, I've had similar experiences where I've ended up co-authoring really cool projects that I would never have been a part of otherwise. And it's led to more great experiences, a bigger network. And it's just, you know, opportunity begets opportunity, and you just on that. But another really important thing is to know when to say no. I'm 31 years old right now, and I think this is the first year that I've actually said no to a major thing that was offered to me that I was about to say yes to. And I finally looked at everything on my plate and my timeline and realized, no, I can't do it. But it took me quite a long time. And ultimately that comes down to time management. So the time management aspect, it sounds like, you know, oh, if you can manage a day planner, you're fine. But grad school's a different beast. Your deadlines are very few and far between, but they're really, really, really heavy. So things like a proposal defense, things like a thesis defense. And then that's kind of it. It's like this desert of time where you don't have those weekly assignments or, you know, short readings to do. It's sort of this big expanse of open time, and there's so much flexibility in grad school, and everyone's program is different, and the things that you sign up to volunteer with or be on committees for are all very different, and it's very much up to you how to manage that. And it can be quite difficult. So saying yes and no is kind of that balance between time management and the opportunities that will kind of come out. And my third thing is mental health. So it kind of links in with everything that I just said. Take advantage of the services that are offered on campus. You will read many, many articles, and as soon as you start talking to graduate students, a lot of the time, mental health is a real concern for graduate students, and it's hard to find resources sometimes, but you're certainly not alone. It's a very, very demanding process, I guess, if you think of grad school as a process rather than just the degree at the end of it. It takes a lot out of you, and you're certainly not alone in seeking out advice and help. And I've taken people to different services. I have gone myself, and it has only been good to do that. And it just kind of going into it, knowing that it is going to be hard. Grad school is certainly not an easy thing. You're doing original research. If you do a research-based degree, nobody has the answers, because if they already had the answers, then why would you do your project, right? And so it's simultaneously exciting and the most thrilling thing when you get a result and you have this piece of knowledge that nobody else in the world yet knows, and being able to share that with the world. It's really, really great. But there can be also a lot of frustrations and lows when experiments don't work, or you're trying to get a piece of writing done and it just isn't clicking. In my case, when I spend 7 days straight in the field and I don't catch a single squirrel, things come up in various ways that are really challenging and hard to deal with. But that's ultimately sort of the point of grad school is that you are able to kind of problem solve through these. Not just that your final research project is going to be, you know, this incredible piece of research, but that you're able to negotiate and problem solve and be creative along the way. But it can be quite tolling. So again, put your mental health first and make sure that you're kind of making sure you've got that network around you. Things that often get lost in talking about grad school, but I wanted to highlight.
Thank you, Andrea. That's absolutely true. Vidushi, you're up last today. What are your top 3 pieces of advice that you wish you'd known?
Okay, I do agree with everyone, and I had the like similar kind of points as well. The things that I would like to add, it's like the whole idea that grad school is not like undergrad. It requires a lot of more time commitment, and then a lot of reading on your like research, and then it also requires you to stay on track almost every day by having a to-do list or having a calendar with all the assignments and stuff. And like in undergrad, you had the option of probably like skipping classes a few times, and it's okay. But then in grad school, there's no option like that, because every class is important, because like there is like participation grades and stuff like that. So yeah, it does require a lot of time commitment, and I pretty much don't have a social life anymore. So, but then on the other hand, like because of the like time commitment, I would tell like please take a break before you start grad school. So I remember when I started grad school, I worked as a research coordinator until until August. So I just took 1 week off before I started school, and I wish if I would have taken the entire spring and summer off, and then have a fresh mind afterwards. So yeah, take a break and then be ready for all the time commitment. So that is point 1. And then point 2 is that be friends and like interact and collaborate with your like with the students in the lab, and then like when you attend a conference, like talk to them as well. And like collaboration is really, and like teamwork is really important. And then yeah, what else? I'm sorry. And then it's okay to have like rejections, like as Andrea has pointed out, rejections or failure, these are absolutely okay. It does not like make you look bad or anything. It's just a like process of learning. Like if you look at failure and rejection as process of learning, then things become way easier. And I think I did say 3, but I would like to add one more. Like in undergrad, we are usually kind of used to like like homeworks and instructions from our professors and etc. But then in grad school, it's more like you have to take the lead. You have to do your own work oftentimes. So in that case, I find that having a to-do list keeps me like have a structured routine. So that is also very important. And that's it.
Thanks, Vidushi. Those are amazing. We've had a number of really, really great questions come in over the chat, and the first is from Alice. So we addressed one already from Grace, but the next one comes from Alice, and she asks, is it important that you are published in undergrad before applying for grad school so that you're more competitive for a well-funded master's or PhD? What do you guys think? I think the fact that all of you who are part of this program are doing research at the undergraduate level with a faculty member already looks really amazing on your application, and that will already go a long way. Do the rest of you have any thoughts around publications if you need to be published at the undergrad level in order to be competitive for a master's or a PhD?
Again, this might be discipline specific, but I would say no. I got into grad school without having any publications under my belt. And I honestly didn't get my first author publication until 2018, and I graduated undergrad in 2010. I had a few co-authored publications. Again, being in the natural sciences, it might work a little bit differently. But having this undergraduate research experience will already above and beyond kind of put you guys at a level of success for grad school. But most of the times, no, I would say it's not. It's becoming more common because of these undergraduate research experiences that various universities are putting forward. But in my experience, certainly not a requirement by any means.
I do agree with Andrea. Like, having a publication is definitely a plus point, because like we do have undergraduate research experiences, and we do have the undergraduate research journal on campus where undergraduate students can publish their papers. So it is definitely a plus point, but then it is not required. Like, as long as you have like some sort of research experiences, which you probably do at the like final year of undergrad, then I think like that is enough to make you competitive. And also, like, if you have a supervisor who is willing to supervise you, that is also extremely important. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And certainly, thank you, Badushi, for mentioning the Undergraduate Research Journal, which we have here on campus. So absolutely. So Alice, if you have things that are publishable, definitely take a look at what that looks like, especially if you are thinking for graduate school. If you're looking to switch up and go to graduate school at a different university, a publication will just give you a really extra big gold star on your application. So you won't go wrong with having that, but it's not necessarily a requirement depending on where you're going and what you want to do. Next question comes from Manana. Do you know who are potential supervisors that are recruiting at your current university or other universities? So what is the best way to approach a supervisor?
I think one of the best ways to approach them is either through the research lab. If you're like in your undergrad, if you can join their research lab and build relationships and show the quality of your work and the quality of your ability to learn is really good, because you can always look at the institution's websites or ask the department's administrative assistants, but sometimes faculty will, like my supervisor made room because she wanted me. And so sometimes if there's a really good fit, they may not be listed, but they're like, well, I know this student's leaving right away, so yeah, I'll take you on right now. So knowing that too, just because someone's not listed, sometimes they may make room for the right one that comes along.
I would also suggest that similar to the same way that you all found faculty supervisors for your undergraduate research that you're currently doing, that would be a similar process to find a graduate supervisor, and that is to reach out to them and say, you know, I'm interested. I've paid attention to your work. Ask to have. You would start it via email, but then you try and set up a Teams or a WebEx conversation, especially in our COVID time, right? Everybody's working from home. There's a few labs on campus that are open, so that might be a possibility, but it's definitely, they're looking for that one-on-one interaction. They need to know a little bit about you. This won't happen just via paper, or very, very rarely. You do need to have either a phone or a WebEx conversation with them, but definitely it's okay to do your background homework. If you haven't actually worked with your particular potential supervisor before, do that background homework. See if you can contact some of the people who work in their lab or who work with them. Check out what they have to say on social media. If they're kind of being grumpy over on social media with their situation, maybe that's a red flag. Or if they're really happy, obviously that's a positive flag. So you can do a little bit of background research, but definitely developing that personal connection is part of any kind of an application process. I'm just going to read, just because Nora's question actually goes through. She said, would you be able to walk us through the major steps and milestones in the process of applying to grad school all the way through to completing grad school? Andrew.
So for my program, I had to do a summer internship, and I'm creating a graduate student hub that has all the information, explains things in a thematic way, not in an institutional way. So that literally will be one of the sections. And it's going to be an image with a different sections that links out. So that I will literally be creating that. It'll be due by like September 1st. So when you see the hub, look in there for sure.
Well, that's awesome. Is that specific for psychology, or is that
College of Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies?
nice? So we'll be able to kind of see the steps for that's the other thing, is that of course you are applying to be, pardon me, when you're a master's or a PhD student, you are under the rubric of the College of Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies, but your application still goes through at the faculty level, and the faculty member has to be registered with the College of Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies, or else they can't supervise you. So it's kind of a two-part process. Andrea or Badushi, do you want to add in a little bit more?
I was just going to say, back in the winter term when we were still on campus, for biology, I put together a grad student info night. So I have a slide deck that kind of goes through some of those things. I'd be happy to share those slides with you guys, because there are quite a few milestones sort of throughout that. So just in the interest of time, if you want, I can share that. Again, it's going to be probably a little bit different depending on the discipline that you're in and what kind of course you're looking at. But I do have that available.
Thank you very much, Andrea. That would be great. Yeah, I'd be, if you don't mind sharing the slide deck, I'd be happy to email it out to everyone who is here today. And then Anana said, and what is the best way to know whether grad school is your cup of tea? And Andrew said, your love of research and learning. Grad students are major nerds in the best possible way. I think the other thing that I would add is that it is quite fine to enter grad school and go, no, not for me. Walk away and go do something else. That is not, that is you knowing yourself. That is not you being a failure. That is you saying, this is not the right fit for me. And you go and you do something else. And to me, that is a sign of strength, not weakness. So if anyone ever tells you differently, send them my way. I'll yell at them for you. Does anyone else have anything? What's the best way to know whether grad school is your cup of tea?
I'm going to add on my comment about like the love of learning and research. And specific for the PhD, the biggest advice I got was your topic should be the thing that you think about in the shower. And like you're just obsessed with it and you love it. And that's how I ended up changing my PhD topic, because my supervisor said, you get too excited about this for this to not be your topic. You need to weave it in. And that was really nice. So like it should be something that you like get excited about, and like if someone asks you, you go on like the biggest trail of explaining your project. Like,
yeah, absolutely. You at the master's level, if you manage to pull it off within that 2 to kind of 3 years, you can probably live with something that's maybe not your favorite thing, but you can do it, but it won't be a happy experience. So the more you like your research project, the happier your experience will be. There's a lot of head nods going on.
Yeah, like I would like to agree with Andrew. Like definitely, I do get a lot of research ideas in the shower. So yeah, that is exactly right. Like you would have to enjoy the process, the studying, the research, to be able to like know that grad school is like definitely for you. But then if there is any instance where you think that it's kind of negatively affecting you, then maybe like that is a point where like there should be like more self-reflection, that if grad school is really for you or not. So yeah.
I'd add too that it's, at least for me, it's a love of problem solving and reading and making connections. On any given day, I will hate different aspects of graduate school. Right now, I have a massive mountain of writing to do in front of me, and I don't want to do any of it. But if you catch me on a different day, all I want to do is write and write my ideas and size different concepts. And you're going to find it. Honestly, I call it like the grad school roller coaster. It is going to be all over the map how you feel about different aspects of it. But ultimately, if you love problem solving, you want to kind of explore a topic really, really in depth and make connections kind of across the board in terms of connecting ideas in the literature. If you're in the sciences, coding and getting your statistics to work is a really big thing too, which is what I've been working on this week. I've kind of pushed all my writing aside because I don't want to do it, and I've just been going down a coding hole and completely focused on that. And so I love that on a given day, I can kind of pick and choose what I want to work on. That there isn't anyone saying, oh, you have to do this for these hours or whatever. If I decide to spend my whole day or even my whole week coding in R and trying to figure out my statistics, I mean, that's a stepping stone to what I want to achieve. And other days I might not be able to code properly or in a way that's effective. So I kind of slip over back to reading or writing and kind of getting back to the ideas sort of portion. And so if you love problem solving and you love kind of tearing down and rebuilding ideas and sort of all these different aspects of the research process, I think grad school is worth a shot for you.
I was thinking about pieces of advice that I would give, and the most important piece of advice that I was given is to make sure that you cultivate friendships outside of grad school. There's a lot of head nods going on. Yeah, it's probably somewhat less important for a master's because you still have your kind of big friend group from your undergraduate group, which is great because everybody's all off doing different things. But when I went back to do my PhD in 2006, I had two kids in school. You know, I was in a different space. But having those friends outside of graduate school keep you grounded. Tim asks, if publications are not critical for grad school admissions, what else can undergrads do to make themselves more competitive to be well funded in a graduate program?
Produce good quality work. Like, I think that's the big one, is like, be proud of the work that you do, and not like, if you have a thought they may comment on this, you make that change. Like, you produce good work and reduce work for like other people, and then they want to work with you more and they want to bring you onto contracts because the work that you provide is good and you're always learning and growing. And I think that would be the big one, is making sure you're proud of your work.
Yeah, in terms of
Go
applying
ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, like when you're coming out of undergrad and you're trying to get into grad school and you don't have a list of publications, having other things on your resume. In academia, we tend to switch more towards a CV, which is a little bit of a different format where you sort of just list everything professional that you've ever done, especially within the academic world. But showing that you are engaged with anything really, as some kinds of leadership. If you have done any field work, any lab work, any research assistantships, any teaching, kind of just like latching on to any of those volunteer opportunities or other, even in a workplace that you've been in, if you've had a job throughout undergrad, and you can see sort of how you were able to problem solve or you did writing or that sort of thing in those jobs, highlighting that as well.
I really important, thinking through your skill set rather than just the classes that you took. Like for if you took, say, a capstone class or you conducted an honors thesis, you've actually already done a research project, an encapsulated research project. And so those highlighting those sorts of things and highlighting, recognizing both any of the problems that you had to solve along the way, or the hiccups or the oopses that you had, as well as the successes that you had, that'll be important too, because professors want to know that you can handle setbacks. That's something that they'll be looking for. So make sure that you're not just talking about the positives, but that you're talking about the negatives too and how you responded to them. Vidushi and Andrew, do you guys have things to add?
I have to run. And so I'm going to put my email though in the, if you have questions, you can feel free to send me an email. So I'll put that in the chat, but I just have to run to another meeting.
Thank you, Andrew, for your time. We really appreciate having you with us today.
Right. I would just, okay, what was the question again? I'm sorry.
What else can undergrads do to make themselves more competitive, to be well-funded in a graduate program?
Okay, so I do agree with everyone, and then I just wanted to add, like, there is this perception, it's like you have to have a like relevant job in order to like being more competitive. But then whether it's a paid job or it's a volunteering, like that is not important. The most important thing is your experience and the skills that you gain from your experience. So like when I was an undergrad, I used to think that it's so hard to get a job, like a proper job in undergrad. So like what can I do? But then I did not see like there are different kind of volunteering opportunities that are also like more they they are also important. So like when you put a volunteering opportunity like a volunteering experience on your resume, that is also as important as your job. I think like the most important thing is your experience. So if you make connections with the professors that you take courses with and do some research stuff with them, then I think that will make you like enough competitive for grad school.
I think probably one of the most important things that we can all do to make ourselves more competitive and more well thought of is to really work on our writing skills. Your communication writing skills, I would suggest are probably, and professionalism in your writing skills are probably one of the most important areas that that you can spend time on and that will reward you in the end. I mean, yes, you can learn different programs and so on and so forth, but the better your professional writing skills, and that's both in emails or in writing up proposals, helping your supervisor to do grant writing along the way. Good writing skills are probably the #1 thing that professors look for. Andrea and Vidushi are agreeing with that. Yeah, it's big. So if you've got it, if you have work to do in that particular area, I would suggest that you spend some time on it. It will pay off, I promise.
I would also add to that, if there's any way that you can do little bits of writing, even if they're small, for something on campus or a local newspaper or something, it not only helps your writing skills, but being able to put links to that on your resume really, really helps. I used to do some writing for the wildlife rehab center that I used to work with, and just being able to put on, here's an example of my communication skills for the general public have really, really helped. So if you can, try to get your writing out there in other ways.
Can I add something?
Go ahead.
So I like, based on my personal experience, one experience that is really precious to me, that really helped me as an undergrad, is to volunteer for the undergrad research journal. that really helps with like improving your writing skills, because at that time you are reading other people's work, and you are also critiquing other people's work, and that also helps to understand where like where are your strengths in writing, and then how you can improve in writing. So I thought, based on my experience, that really helped.
And they are always looking for volunteers. So yeah, so volunteering with the University of Saskatchewan Undergraduate Research Journal, known as USurge, and I'll put that in an email as well. So that I absolutely agree with Badushi. That is an excellent, and it looks really good on your resume. It shows both your commitment to writing and your commitment to research and to understanding other people's research. It's probably one of the simplest and best ways to really burnish up your resume if you are considering graduate school. So I think we're going to leave it there. I haven't seen any more new questions coming in, and we've gone a little bit over time, but that's okay. That's because there were so many great questions coming in and great answers from our panelists. Thank you to the two of you, and of course I'll send a thank you to Andrew as well. Thank you all for being with us today, and thank you to Tab for taking the time to give us his thoughts as well and to send those along to us. And yeah, if you have any more questions, so Andrea is going to send us her slide deck, and I will post that around on an email to everyone. Thank you so much for joining with us today, and we will stop the recording and say goodbye.